And as a result, these are the correlations that we came up with. And I'm just talking about the Japanese students. On the left-hand side, you see the internal model. And right here on this side, you see this is the classroom situation right here. This is outside the classroom. Oops. And here you have the foreign country, the external model. Here what we found was that those students who said they could read and understand their textbooks, 0.75 correlation with how much they said they could do oral activities in the classroom, like doing discussions and debates, which means being able to read textbooks is essential. Very important. Of course, this is correlation. It doesn't say which is the cause and which is the effect, but still you can see very strong correlation. We also, of course, took correlations over here, but the strongest correlations. I've only written the strongest correlations here. And we found that if the students say they can do debating and so forth in the classroom, 0.65 correlation with how much they said they can use English in the real world, reading newspapers, making telephone calls, and so forth. Okay? So the classroom makes sense. It depends on how much oral activities you do in the classroom that can transfer. Right? The possibility of transfer to the real world. How much the students said they can read their textbooks? Again, 0.459 correlation with what they said they can do in the real world. And if the students said they can function using English in the real world, this seems to transfer to being able to use English in the real world situation in foreign countries. And this correlation was stronger than the correlation between this, or this, or this, or this, which means that simply being able to function in the classroom in Japan might not necessarily have a positive correlation with how much they will be able to function in the foreign country. You've got to be able to get the students to function in the world that they're living in, the internal open seas in Japan. That's what we found. And we also did a little correlation with, on the vertical column here, you see the way the teachers teach. Cognitive means they teach English through discussions and debates and whatnot. Communication, teaching through conversation. Organization, teaching, writing through, for example, paragraph structures and so forth. Oral related, getting the students to write what they heard. Process writing, rewriting is being the main focus of the process writing approach. Summary reading, which means getting the students to understand the main ideas of the passage, getting to see if they can understand what the writer is really trying to say. Just schema reading, getting the students to read a passage by first giving them background information about what this passage is all about. And then, of course, teaching reading through translation. And we asked the students, and the most important point was right here, what we just saw. How much can they use English in the real world outside, in Japan, depending on how they were taught. Now for this, we only had about 5,000 high school students because we couldn't find teachers for all the students that we had. And another important point that you have to note is that there is no one-to-one correlation between the teacher and the student. The only thing we have here is, these are the teachers who teach in this school, and these are the students who learn in this school. Because teachers change from year to year. So there's no way that you can really find a strict correlation between one teacher and what the students are gain from that. So we did a correlation between the school. The teachers teaching that school and the students learning in that school. And what we found was this, right here. If you take a look at how much the students can read newspapers and so forth, use English in the real world, you see that if the students learn from teachers who taught discussions and debates and presentations, yes. Okay? A positive correlation, statistically significant. Communication through conversations and so forth, yes. Organization writing, yes. Okay? Next one here. Writing process, writing as a process writing technique, using that approach. Reading for gists and main ideas, yes. Schema reading, getting students to understand the background, yes. However, the important thing is right here at the very bottom. Those students who learn from teachers who taught reading through translation, you see a negative correlation, which means that the more they use translation, the less they can function in the world. This is real data. It's real data. It shows that the fishbowl doesn't work. The fishbowl doesn't work. Okay? Another interesting thing is right here. Everyday conversation, no correlation with anything with data. Everyday conversation, You can have no proficiency in English, go to the United States and order a Big Mac. You just point. That's all you need to do. So everyday conversation has really no real correlation with how a teacher is taught the language in the classroom. This is something that needs experience. So simulated activities, great. Getting the students to do role plays, fine. But conversation is not something you teach as an academic subject per se. That's another thing that we found. We also found, we compared Korean high school students and Japanese high school students. And as I said, we used a test called the GTEC for students, which has a reading, listening, and a writing section, 3 sections in the test, 800 points. We divided the students into different scores on the GTEC. G1 means that their scores were very low. G6 means that their scores were very high, almost above 800. Okay? And we matched the answers to the can-do questions. I can do this, I can do that. Okay? And this is a result of this question. I can read and understand English textbooks. Those who said, yes, I can do that. In the Japanese students' case, the students had to have at least about 1/2 the score on GTEC in order for them to say, yes, I can. The red dots show those who said yes, and the blue triangles, those who said they cannot. But take a look at the Korean students. They said, yes, I can read textbooks, even though their scores were 1/2 on the GTEC than the Japanese. What does that mean? Well, we looked at other items, and we looked at all the other items, and almost all of the items tended to show the same thing. Which means that even if, in terms of objective test scores, the Korean students have a lower score, they have more confidence and say, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it. The can-do criteria shows the confidence of the students in using English. And we wanted to see where this confidence came from. And so we looked at this. We asked the students a very simple question. Have you ever done this? Yes or no? Yes or no? That's it. Even once. Have you ever done this? Reading explanations in English, on the left-hand side, the Japanese students, 32% yes. Korean students, 77.6% yes. Take a look at all these items. For all of them, Korean students, from 2.5 to 2.5 times more exposure to real English. In other words, unless the students are exposed to real English, their confidence level is not going to go up. We notice, for example, those students who go abroad on exchange programs, they come back, their English isn't really that great, but they have a lot more confidence in dealing with unknown situations and foreign situations. That's the important thing. The experience provides the necessary background for the creation of the motivation and the confidence to use and learn the language. Now, how can we get the students to do this if they are always in the fishbowl, always having to learn native pronunciation, native grammar, perfect grammar, and so forth? It's impossible. Impossible. So what we do is we have to look at a different kind of problem, which is many people call international English. This is based on Peter Strebin's model, and this talks about English being divided into different types of English. Native Englishes, of course, these are the native Englishes, the American English, British English, and so forth. The non-native Englishes, these would be, on the left-hand side, you have non-intranational, which means English as a foreign language, like in Japan, China, Korea, and so forth. Intranational, non-native English, like in India, the Philippines, Malaysia, and so forth. Second language, English, official English. And what Strebin says is that international English is a kind of English which is what he calls equidistant from all types of English. It's equidistant from all types. It's not the same as native English. It's not the same as second language English. It's not the same as foreign language English. People who speak all of these different types of Englishes, they have to learn or relearn international English, which is a common way of communicating. How do we do that? Let's suppose we had this kind of set. A native speaker talking to a native speaker. There's no international English there. That's native English. Let's suppose you had an Indian speaking to an Indian, non-native speaker A, non-native speaker A. This is not international English, it's Indian English. Let's suppose you had a Japanese speaker speaking English with another Japanese speaker in English. This is not international English, it's Japanese English. So where does international come in? It comes in when we cross borders. When a Japanese is talking to a Korean, that's international. When a Japanese is talking to an American, that's international. When we're talking to Indians, that becomes international. In other words, international English occurs when people from different cultures and different linguistic backgrounds have to talk to each other. What happens when people talk to each other? They have to modify their language so that the other person can understand. When we're talking to Americans, Americans will not talk to us in the way that they talk to other Americans. They will modify their language. They will use foreigner talk. They will modify the structure of the language. They will simplify the vocabulary. I mean, that's because we don't share the same linguistic background, the social background, cultural background. So in order to understand each other, we have to make sure that the language we use is comprehensible to each other. And so we don't use the kind of language that we use towards other native speakers. So international English is created in communication situations. There is no international English without communication, which means there is no international English in a fishbowl. International English can only be created in a situation where there is real communication. That's where international English is created. When I'm talking to a Korean, that's one international English. The kind of international English which will help me to comprehend what the Korean is saying and what will help the Korean to understand what I'm saying. But when I'm talking to an American, that's a different kind of international English. Every time I speak to someone with a different level of English from a different culture, I create, or we create, mutually create a different version of international English. And that's the kind of concept that I have. And that, I think, is what is important. So, no objective standard for international English. But, if you take a look at, and some people will say, okay, if that's true, then what's going to be the model that teachers should be using to teach this international English? And I say, the native speaker. But the native speaker talking to a Japanese student. Not native speakers talking to other native speakers. There are some people who say it's important to get our students to listen to and comprehend actual speak. You try to get them to understand Hollywood actors talking to each other. Now, what American is going to use that kind of language towards the Japanese in real communication? Nobody. So how important is it for our students to understand that kind of conversation? Very interesting. One of the research that I did with the Japanese students and the teachers, we asked the teachers how much movies and videos and so forth they use in the classroom. Teachers who were very active in trying to get their students to learn communicative English, they use videos and movies quite a lot, clips. Okay? About 50% of the teachers said they use it. And then we asked the students who were learning from the teachers, which of these different activities, like discussions and debates and movies and so forth, they understand the best and they understand the worst. Movies came last. They don't understand the movies. Because it's native speak. Of course. That's not international English. When I've been observing native speakers of American English and British English, Australian English, and so forth, who are AOTs here in Japan. When they're talking to their students, you know what? Their English tends to become very similar. Sometimes I make a mistake and say, are you really from Australia? You don't sound Australian, like you don't speak Australian English anymore. And I think that's true. I mean, the more you become used to talking to the Japanese students, the more you change and modify your language. And each person modifies his or her dialect so that it becomes a little more common. And I think, and that is a very beautiful kind of English that the students should learn. That's the model that I would recommend. AOTs have a big job to do. That job is to really communicate with the students so that the students can understand. Because that's the kind of English that will be the model that the students should learn. However,